you were talking about Kamala Harris, and I think this might be a good time to talk about this because she might be the vice presidential nominee. What specifically did she do where there was someone who was innocent or someone who was wrongfully convicted?
Let me give a caveat.
Okay.
Caveat is that I know I'll catch shit from some people that say you have to do everything you can to make sure that Trump is not elected. And I will say that even she's an improvement as vice president if he does pick her. Anything's an improvement in my mind. So with that caveat, it would take this podcast and 4 more to go through. She fiercely fought wrongful convictions and was shamed by judges when she was district attorney in San Francisco. What was the case? The Gage case?
George Gage.
The George Gage case, where her prosecutors hid evidence and they tried to protect. Once she knew that there was evidence that was withheld from defense attorneys, once she should have known, in my opinion, that people were innocent, she tried to protect those convictions. Why? Because she wanted to continue winning. She blocked DNA. She went to great lengths to try to block access to DNA for people that were accused of or convicted of felonies. Think about it. We're talking about a $12 DNA test to see if the biological material from a crime that has been preserved is actually the defendant's, right? She blocked access to that. I mean, the list.
How do you block access to something like that? That seems like that should be a right.
Yeah, it seems like it should be a right, but in a lot of states, there's legislation that says you cannot get access to it, and the rationale behind it is that it will open up a floodgate of criminal defendants asking for the biological evidence in their case to be tested. I mean,
that's the last thing we would want is more innocent people being freed. So what was her justification for this?
You know, when she's asked for her justification of it, it's always been on a debate stage, and she'll always default to, I stand by my record as a prosecutor, and she's never had an explanation that I have ever seen. I don't know, Jason and I were talking about this before we came on today because there was a New York Times piece by, her name's escaping me.
Lara Bazelon.
Lara Bazelon, which if any of your listeners want to listen to it, she goes into, exhaustive detail about specific cases and things that Kamala Harris did. And, the sad part about it, yeah, that's it right there.
New York Times, Kamala Harris was not a progressive prosecutor.
Yeah, she was often on the wrong side of history.
What is that? The highlight, the marijuana one that you just highlighted?
She stood by criminalizing marijuana in this state.
Now, listen, what we can hope is that she's certainly been saying all the right things lately. I don't know what to believe, to be honest.
Well, it's because she wants to be the president.
Well, okay, fair enough. I mean, I like to believe that people can evolve, and I hope that her viewpoints have evolved. Now she supports legalization, I believe, but the fact is it's impossible to ignore. And I hope Biden picks someone else personally, but, we'll see.
Biden ain't picking anything.
I will.
They're doing it for him at this point.
Well, I'll support him no matter what, who he picks. If he picks her, so be it, because I believe we're in an existential crisis and we need to.
Do you see the
look at this? This is crazy. She could have demanded DNA testing in Cooper's case. Now, Kevin Cooper is on death row. All right, you think about this. If they had denied DNA testing in Clementi's case, he would have been either dead or still on death row. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a test. She has constantly, in case after case, issue after issue, and look, the people that she hurts the most are people of color in this country because they make up,
disproportionate number of
disproportionate, and so it's kind
the
of
truant children thing made me fucking sick.
Awful.
She went after the parents of truant children and threatened them with jail time. Imagine you're a single mom. You're just doing your best to put food on the table. You have to work 2 jobs, and your kids are understandably fucking up and not going to school because there's no father around.
You know how devastating this is. Think about it this way, because I can only think about it in real life examples. Okay, this is how there's enough of a shit show and a fight to get out. Look, I have a client in New York who's like, and these people become like family to us. I mean, he's adopted one of the exonerees as his daughter now. You know, John Restivo was convicted of raping and murdering someone with two of his friends, two people that worked for him. He is framed by a cop. They take a hair from the victim and they plant it in his moving truck.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And the way that they found out that it was planted is that when your hair, you're going to love this, right? When the hair is attached to the human head, when you die, there's a physiological phenomenon that happens called post-mortem root banding, where a band goes around the root of your hair, okay? And it happens after you've been dead the minimum 4 hours. Prosecution's theory is that he picks up this girl, 16-year-old girl, walking home from the roller skating rink with his two buddies, throws her in a van, they rape her, kill her, and dump her near a cemetery, and it all happens in 45 minutes. The way that they finally find out that he was framed is it's a moving truck. They search his moving truck, and they find hundreds of hairs because we all shed hair. They find one hair from the victim, and it's pristine. It's the only pristine hair in the truck. No kinks on it, no dirt, no debris. And there's a post-mortem root band around it,
Oh, God.
which means they had to have taken it from the autopsy.
After 4 hours.
After 4 hours. And we ended up finding out that the cop had access to the envelopes where the autopsy was. In any event, John Restivo, back to the DNA, the perpetrator ejaculated, and they had a lot of semen, a lot of biological material, DNA. He fought for years to get access to the DNA. Finally gets access to it. They test the DNA, and he's excluded, and his two co-defendants are excluded, all right? What the prosecutor does is they say, okay, well, there must have been a fourth perpetrator.
Oh, Jesus
So they start
Christ.
testing, and this is a process that took years. They start 5 years. They start testing every single known male associate of John Restivo, Dennis Halstead, and John Kogut, and they can't. And it's only after that that he gets out. He spent 18 years for a rape and murder he didn't commit. He's, I love him. He's like a brother to me now, but he's destroyed. You don't come back from
What
this.
happens to someone like that? Do they have any recourse? Is there anything they can do?
There's a happy ending in that regard in John's story. I was one of the lawyers that represented him in his civil rights trial. He was awarded $18 million, $1 million for every year that he was incarcerated. And, to show you like what the lasting psychological damage. So we got to go to a civil jury for civil rights violations against Nassau County, which indemnified this cop that framed him. And he got some closure that way, to the extent that you can get any closure. And we were outside waiting for the verdict, outside of the courthouse. And he's smoking a cigarette. And he put out the cigarette and he took a plastic bag out of his pocket, grabbed the butt and put it in the plastic bag and sealed it and put it in his pocket. I said, John, what the fuck are you doing? He said, you think I'm going to let someone take my DNA and frame me again? And I get, that's how bad it is. So think about that in the context of Kamala Harris. To block access to DNA, once you get the fucking DNA, you're still sometimes in a crazy uphill battle because there's prosecutors, in my opinion, just like Kamala Harris,
That want to win.
that want to win and want to protect that conviction.
And we have so many cases, Joe. I mean, this year or last year, the Innocence Project was representing a guy in Arkansas named Liddell Lee. Was it Kansas or Arkansas? I think it was Arkansas.
It was Arkansas.
And we were just wanted the DNA tested. I mean, we had a lot of evidence that he was innocent, and the state refused to let us test it. They went ahead and executed him anyway. We also have cases like the Sedley Alley case, which ironically is the same prosecutor that prosecuted my adopted daughter, Nora Jackson. But in Sedley Alley's case, he was executed, and the state denied him access to DNA. It was a horrible crime. A young cadet girl was jogging, and she was brutally, I think, raped and murdered. And he was executed for this crime, asking for the DNA to be tested. And the state refused. And 5 years later, the higher court said, oh, you guys made a mistake. You should have allowed the DNA testing. Now his daughter has come forward and said, I want to know. I want my dad's DNA tested. I want to prove his innocence. And we now have evidence of who we think it might have been, because there was another guy who was a serial murderer and rapist who was in that area at that time. We don't know that it was him, but until we test the DNA, we can't know. And the state has refused to let her test it, even posthumously. So this goes on all over the country, and it's crazy. Of course we want the DNA tested. Everybody should want the DNA tested. But one thing I do want to point out is that it's gratifying to see attention being brought by you and by others, people who are so prominent in society. And it's also become such a hot button issue that if you look at, for instance, Amy Klobuchar, right? I mean, her campaign was derailed because people were going, hey, what about Mayan Burrell, which was a 16-year-old kid that she prosecuted. There was evidence of his innocence. She ignored all of it. He's still in prison 20 years later. And she touted this as a she bragged about
like
it.
Like it was an accomplishment.
As an accomplishment, right? And
wasn't she also part of the problem why Derek Chauvin was still out? Was still acting as a police officer?
I'm not familiar with
that. I believe she was. Yeah, I mean, I
haven't heard that. Tell us about.
She's from Minneapolis.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
No, there's a connection because it had something to do with him and his the prior cases where he had exhibited police brutality, and that they had done nothing about it. She was connected to that in some, and it, in many people's eyes, was eliminating her as being a possible candidate for vice president because they thought it was going to come up. I read that very briefly a few months ago. Jamie will find something if it's.
It says she denied the charge that she didn't charge him, but I don't know if
she denied they didn't charge him. What does that mean?
Does that denied reports that she failed to bring charges on a 2006 case.
Sounds like a double negative.
It's a flat out lie, but that's what
she says. It's a flat out lie. She also doesn't know who the president of Mexico is.
But maybe now, Joe, maybe now we will have an environment where, prosecutors we know are ambitious people, generally speaking. They're, everyone is, right? And everyone has the right to, succeed to the level that they, are capable of succeeding to, but not by cheating, right? Going back to what you said before. But now there's finally, even though there are no legal consequences, except in the rarest of cases, but now at least there are real consequences in terms of running for higher office where these things can come back and bite you in the ass. And hopefully that will make people think twice.
And this is the case with Klobuchar.
Yeah.
And tell us the case one more time. What happened?
There's a kid named Mayan Burrell, M-Y-O-N Burrell, B-U-R-E-L-L. And he was a 16-year-old. I think it was a young girl, 11-year-old girl was shot in her kitchen when she was doing her homework. And, a lot of pressure to solve that case, right? And they picked up this kid. I don't know why exactly. I don't remember all the details of the case because I have so many of them in my head at once.
Amy Klobuchar helped jail teen for life, but case was flawed. And this is in AP News.
Yeah, and this is a long ass time ago, and he's still in prison. And and by the way, we're picking on certain people, but this is not a problem that's exclusive to Democrats by any means. There are a ton of. The Arkansas case, of course, was a Republican.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what was the evidence that indicated that he was innocent? Do you know what the case is?
I remember that the actual killer confessed in this case. And
this guy's still in jail.
Yeah, he's still in jail. There's a lot of evidence of his innocence. We can go back through it, but it's a disgusting case. And he is, but he's still there, just like so many of these other people are.